If we want to continue our waves all the way up to the fingers, because I feel it can be really fun to add the stripes here, I'm gonna do it with duplicate stitch. So first I'm going to measure how much yarn I need for one column. Then I'll double the amount. I counted the rows and it's about 30 rows. I rounded up, so let's measure like we would for knitting. I'm going to leave a tail because I'm going to need to weave in the tail, and then I'm going to measure 10 stitches. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's on the same needle that I worked my finger with. So that's 10 stitches, and I have about 30. So I'm going to take about 3 times the length of 10. And I'm going to double it because I want to have 2 columns. And I'm going to add a little tail at the end to weave in. And of course I always take a little bit more just to be sure. So this is the amount I'm going to need for the duplicate stitch. Let's cut the yarn and begin working the columns. I'm going to start by taking my yarn from back to front in the middle of the last V of my contrast color. So I'm going to go into the glove and insert my needle into the center of the right V. And pull the yarn through. I want to leave this much of a tail. So I'm going to hold the tail here and then pull the yarn until my hand reaches the surface of the glove, and that's where I stop pulling. I'm going to start with just where I am, duplicate 2 stitches because each column is 2 stitches. I'm going to go from where I am, the center of my stitch. I'm going to go up under both legs of the stitch above. So my stitch is covering the stitch that is just above the last contrast color stitch. And I'm going to go back after I went under both legs of the stitch above the stitch that I'm making. I'm going to go back to the same base, center of the previous row, and then I want to go out from the center of the next stitch. So let's do that. I'm going to go in the same stitch I went out of and out of the stitch next to it, which is the second stitch of the column. And I'm going to pull the yarn. And when I'm making duplicate stitches, I want my stitches to be about the same size as the rest of the stitches. So just pull until it looks about the same. Now I have the second stitch should be the same height, the same position as the stitch that I made. So I'm going to go under both legs of the stitch above the stitch I'm making. And my stitches are pointing upwards. It means that my V's are opening upwards. So this is what I'm looking. I'm looking for a V that is, the base is at the bottom and it's opening upwards, and I'm going under both legs of this V with the stitch that I want to cover between the yarn and the needle. I'm going to pull my yarn here. That's the right leg of the stitch, and I'm going to go back into the same place. And when I come out, I want to come out either at the center of this stitch or the center of this stitch, so we can go up one row. So I'm going to go into the center of the stitch below where I came from, and then I'm going to go sideways one row up, so my needle comes out through the center of the stitch I made on the right. And I'm going to pull a little bit just to have the stitches in the same height. So we have two new stitches, one row above. I'm in the middle of this stitch. I want to cover the stitch above, so I'm going to go under both legs of the next row. And I'm covering this center stitch between where my yarn is and where my needle came in. And I'm going back to the center of this stitch under the legs. I don't want to go into the glove. I can only do that, I can remain on the surface and just go under my contrast color yarn. So I don't need to go inside the finger. So under both legs, into the center of this stitch and out of the center of the stitch next to it. And make this stitch a bit smaller. And then I'm going to go under the legs of the stitch above. And I can go from right or from the left. I'm going this time from left to right because my needle should go to the direction of this next stitch I'm going to make. The next stitch I'm going to make is to the right, so I'm going from left to right. Pull the yarn a little bit. I'm going back to the center of the stitch, the previous stitch, and then I'm going to go up to the center of the stitch I just made. So make sure you're going up one row. This is still the same row I was. I want to go up one row, so I'm going under the left leg of the last stitch I made. And I'm going to pull the yarn. Next, I want to cover the next row, and I'm going from right to left because the next stitch is going to be on the left. So I'm coming from right to left under both legs of the stitch above the one that I'm covering. I'm going into the same spot I went out of, so it's the center of the previous stitch, and under the right leg of the next stitch, the stitch next to it. Pulling the yarn through and just pulling the stitch a little. Now I'm coming from left to right under the both legs of the stitch in the row above the one that I'm making, that I'm covering. And back into the stitch below where I was, under both legs and under the left leg of the stitch that I made on the right. So I'm going diagonally up. I want to go up one row. And pull the yarn. So you can see that we are slowly covering, continuing this row, this column, or the 2 stitches, and we're going to do that all the way up. So 1 stitch to the right, 1 stitch to the left, 1 stitch to the right, 1 stitch to the left, and make sure the direction you're going is, if I'm making the right stitch, I'm going from right to left. If I'm making the left stitch, I'm going from left to right, and always come back after you make the stitch into the same place your yarn is coming from, and then go out of the center of the stitch next to it. Then when we go up a row, we want to go diagonally up to the stitch we made, the last stitch we made. I hope that's clear and that you can create your own columns with a contrast color if you want, or you can just leave it as it is.